Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Orange Pill Podcast. My name is Graham Allen. I'm going to lower my chair just a touch so I'm right on the mic. Welcome. We are here at the Orange Pill Studios in illustrious downtown San Salvador. I went to a soccer game last weekend when my friend Bob was in town. We went to see the San Miguel Aguilas, which is like one of the better teams in this country. We went to a game. It was great. We were the only white dudes in the whole stadium, and it was fantastic, and everyone was excited. Some people were like, what are you guys doing here? Not in like a negative way, but like, really? You guys came to this little small soccer game? But it was a blast. And so one of the many cool things, and I like it because their colors are a little Bitcoiny, a little orange in there.
A touch of Bitcoin. Yeah, well, that's a great thing. There's a lot to do here in El Salvador. Football games, the beach, the mountains, the volcano. I was on top of Santa Ana volcano 2 nights ago with Dr. Cruz, and he's got the decentralized medicine initiative and the era of light. And it was a great event, and we had a lot of people show up. And it was all about kind of a new era and a new law that's passing in El Salvador that will open up medicine to, let's call it, a decentralized way of administering and practicing medicine to avoid all the gatekeepers and to avoid all of the monopolists that occupy the center of the medical industry, pharmaceutical industry. Mm-hmm. You know, in the United States, if you look at a chart of the cost of medicine and the split between dollars going toward administrators versus dollars going to actual doctors. And you see that the amount of money that goes into the pockets of doctors is up slightly over 20 years. And then the amount of money that goes into the pockets of the administrators is up like a 45-degree angle. And all that extra money you pay through Obamacare and other types of scams and services goes into the pockets of the intermediaries, and everyone just they insert themselves into the process to get a fee. And this is what makes the medical care in the U.S. so ridiculously expensive. It's unnecessarily so. On that note, also a lot of people coming to El Salvador as medical tourists because you can get a lot done that you might get in the U.S. You can get it done in El Salvador for 80% less. It's the same quality service. For dental and medical service procedures that are fairly standard procedures, you can get done here a lot cheaper. So you're seeing medical tourism arrive here. And on top of the regular tourism, the Holy Week, which is coming up, I believe, next week, they expect $110 million of tourist dollars to show up, in addition to what was there last year, 110 million growth in the tourist dollar. Tourism is already something like 25% ahead of where it was last year at this time here in 2024. So 2024 is going to be another gangbusters year of tourism. And we also have the news that the president announced he's got 450 million or so of Bitcoin now in a cold wallet, right? They've got it stored in cold wallet. And that 5,000 Bitcoin, of course, is double what people were carrying on their books as the estimate of what El Salvador had in their Bitcoin reserves. But it's actually doubled just as what he calls a big chunk of Bitcoin, right? So this is not the whole stash, but it's a big chunk of the Bitcoin. It's now in cold storage. And so that is the reserves of the country. Unlike the Fed, which never gets audited, unlike Fort Knox that never gets audited, this gets audited every 10 minutes because it's part of the Bitcoin blockchain and everyone can see it because it's totally transparent. So this is a transparent central banking reserves. Unlike any other country in the world, again, El Salvador and President Bukele leading the way. And there's more good news to come on that front, more financialization, financial architecting, kind of looking at the balance sheet of the country, how to make it better, how to improve it, how to add more Bitcoin. So the country, in my view, can mimic the playbook to some degree of Michael Saylor over at MicroStrategy. You know, he's using his balance sheet to ratchet up a leverage play on Bitcoin because the collateral value of his Bitcoin keeps going up, which allows him to float more stock, more bonds to buy more Bitcoin. And this is having a positive effect on the market capitalization of the company and the stock price of the company. Here in El Salvador, similarly gaming the system, but I would say they're looking at it more in terms of the rating agencies because the rating agencies still have El Salvador rated as junk. What if you were to do an honest analysis of their creditworthiness, you would come up with investment grade for sure, above junk. But that, and where therein lies an opportunity, because they can look forward to seeing their credit rating going up notch by notch every quarter for the next 2-3 years, which means interest rates go down for the country. So they're going to be able to continuously borrow at lower rates and buy Bitcoin. And that will improve the collateral value of what they have on the books to float more sovereign debt to buy more Bitcoin. You know, I'm trying to push a few ideas, kind of advanced, you know, Wall Street tricks and things, but you know, we'll see what happens there. But nevertheless, the balance sheet is improving, and they never see you coming, right? The world's finances and the world's banking structure and infrastructure of central banks is antiquated. It's serves a model that became extinct once Bitcoin came on the scene. So therein lies some opportunity, because into that mix of mismatched risks and rewards and incentives lies opportunity. And it boils down to what's called a speculative attack. So a speculative attack is you're using the money of the central bank to attack the central bank. George Soros did this in 1991 or thereabouts, where he broke the Bank of England, made £1 billion in a week, using the bank's own money to bankrupt the bank. And so this is kind of what the world has figured out. You can borrow money from these central banks at pretty cheap to buy Bitcoin, and then use the collateral value of that to keep a virtuous cycle going to effectively destroy the fiat money world completely and replace it with Bitcoin. So this is what's going on with MicroStrategy, and this is what's going on in El Salvador. It's a speculative attack against fiat money and the central banks. So Bitcoin's got a long way to run. In this bull market, you know, the cycle won't peak out until we see well into the six figures on Bitcoin. And so, you know, the fun is just beginning, Graham. I know, as a Bitcoin mogul yourself. Also, at the Dr. Cruz's event over the past 2 days, I came up with a metaphor. We came up with a poetic insight into the protocol, into the Bitcoin protocol, to elucidate it and illuminate the ingenious properties that are characteristic of this revolutionary mindfuck that is Bitcoin. And it's about volatility. So, you know, people say they complain about volatility, but check this out. If you're somebody who doesn't know how to surf and they throw you into the surf, you're going to be upset. You'll be, you know what, the surf is too much. Yeah. I can't handle it. I'm actually drowning. The waves are hitting me and I don't know what to do. But if you're a surfer, you are letting the surf, the wave, work for you. The volatility of the surf is working for you because you're in the moment, you're in the surf, you are surfing that wave. Similarly in Bitcoin, if you are in Bitcoin and surfing the volatility, you're not aware of it being volatile, you're in Bitcoin, you're in the wave, you're surfing the Bitcoin wave, you don't feel the volatility. Just like a surfer would not feel the volatility of a wave, right? So it doesn't exist for people in the Bitcoin space. When people who are fully inculcated into the Bitcoin sphere and they hear people complaining about volatility, it literally doesn't register. We literally don't know what it means. It's like saying to a surfer, oh my God, that wave was 5 inches bigger than the last one. And you're just like, what? Huh? I'm a surfer. What the fuck are you talking about? All right. So, and this came up during the event. I spontaneously had this insight into the protocol, once again revealing within its pristine aesthetic perfection something that rejiggered the synapses in my brain in such a way as to create thoughts that permeated throughout the gray matter and infected other cells and turned into something of a convulsion. I was on the floor actually having a seizure, but it was worth it.
Were there psychedelics at this event, Max?
Dr. Cruz is really Dr. Feelgood. He's the Timothy Leary of our generation.
That's what I feel. I was like, okay.
You say, put these glasses on and you'll feel better. But he doesn't tell you they're coated with, acid. And it's going in through the cornea into your brain directly. And you're high as fuck. Okay? He didn't tell us that when we arrived at the event. Right? But, it was all good in the end.
this event's starting to make sense to me now. I was like, oh, you guys are on some mountaintop doing whatever. And he's talking about decentralized medicine. And okay, that's cool. I get it. That's awesome.
It's all decentralized, Graham.
Yeah, there's a,
You know what I'm saying?
yeah, there's a unicorn rising and he's going to fix it all. That's great.
Bus,
Yeah.
take us to the special place.
The trees were talking to us. It was amazing, man. Like,
Yeah, it's a new way to get better.
we were all naked and body painting. And that's when I had this analogy of surfing.
Yeah.
And I was like, I got to tell my buddy Graham because he'll love this.
You're down in the ocean, just talking to the fish and surfing and having a pupusa. And I was up in the mountains, having a canapé and some acid-coated spectacles glued to my eyeballs.
Some peyote pupusas.
There's a man in here.
There's a man in here sniffing around. Well, no, actually, your analogy is so great because
Thank you.
one of the things as a surfer, and I've surfed with I'm a decent surfer. I've surfed with really, really good surfers. And one of the things you see, what really good surfers have is what's called wave recognition. So they can look out and go, oh, here we go. And I'm like, here, what goes? And they get right into position. They know exactly where the wave is going to be. And they don't get wrecked or wiped out.
All right.
So as I see that, I'm like, recently, so we hit an all-time high of 73,000, whatever. And then we've had this pullback and I'm not like flipping out because like you say, I'm like, oh, sweet.
Right.
A dip.
Right.
I'm going to buy a little bit of this dip.
Right.
And it's just like a surfer, like maybe this wave is too big or there's already somebody on it. I'll wait for a smaller wave, catch it, boom. I did that on Sunday. I had a great session on Sunday. It was just bam, boom, boom. And
so by wave recognition, you're not saying that you recognize the waves like, oh, here comes Bob from the polar vortex. I recognize him. He's one of my favorite waves. You recognize the wave. His name is Bob. That's not what you're saying. You don't recognize the individual waves like you would a pet.
No.
Or a friend who lives across the street.
You recognize what the waves are doing. So in surfing, you have what's called a set of waves, like and 4 or 5 waves, and you start to get like, okay, the third wave is typically the biggest one, and wave recognition is what the wave is going to do.
Yeah,
not like a specific, like that's the Bob wave. Like you're just like, okay, and when the waves are this big, they break to my right or whatever. When they're smaller, they break, and each break is different, and so you really kind of get a sense of. And as you say, you're in the ocean, you're in it. And then you can wipe out and have bad wrecks. And to your analogy, I would point that as the people that then are trying to time the market, and do that crazy shit with Bitcoin, or I'm going to, get involved in some shit coins or whatever,
So like the Wayne Gretzky of surfing. You try to be where the waves are going to be.
Yes.
Right? Your wave recognition. You're like, oh, that third wave, when it gets here, I'm going to be here because I'm going to be in the curl. And I'm going to be yelling "Cowabunga."
Exactly. Same thing with hockey. Like the best hockey players, like I'm going to put the puck there, and I'm not going to pass to you. I'm going to pass to that area, and it's the same thing. And I'm a decent surfer, but like I've seen really experienced surfers, they'll just start paddling, and I'm like, oh, they catch it perfect. They know exactly where it's going to break. They catch it perfectly. Because if you're too inside, you'll get smoked. If you're outside, you'll miss it. And again, like you say, no one's like afraid or freaked out. Everybody's just like,
right. The volatility is working for them. The waves are working for them. Now, let me ask you this, because you're from Hollywood, via Las Vegas, and
in Chicago.
And what are the best surfing movies? The first one that comes to mind, of course, would be Endless Summer. I believe it came out during the 90s.
Robert August, yeah.
Okay, and Robert August is what, the director?
Robert August is one of the guys in the movie.
The narrator, because it has a narrator.
He's the narrator, I believe. I forget who directed it, but Robert August has since become, he's a shaper, he makes boards down. He was down in Costa Rica for years. I was down there in 2018. He narrated watching the movie. Saw him shape a board. So that is like the gold standard, because that's probably one of the first movies that came out about surfing.
It seemed to be. a movie that captured the zeitgeist and maybe launched the whole surfing culture in a lot of ways. And to this day, it's still really referenced as a seminal piece in documentary filmmaking and narrative filmmaking. And
I have an Endless Summer piece of artwork from the poster in my apartment.
It's iconic poster, the bold fluorescent colors I believe they used. And so that came out, I think, in the 1960s. And so the other two movies that come to mind would be, I think it's called Point Break.
Oh, yeah. That's Patrick Swayze, baby.
Patrick Swayze, right? And that's like and also wasn't the guy from The Matrix in that?
Yeah, Keanu Reeves is in it. He's an undercover agent, and Gary Busey's his boss.
Gary Busey, one of a fantastically interesting actor, Gary Busey. So now, as a surfer yourself, how do you see that film? Did it capture a certain culture? Was it interesting? Did it have good surfing scenes?
That movie is entertaining. Now, this is where my surfing and my comedy, I wrote a book, I co-wrote a book called Comedy Film Nerds, and I had a podcast. So this is where my love of movies and surfing. So as an entertaining movie, it's entertaining. As far as accurate with surfing, it has a lot of like Hollywood stereotypes, like the tribalism, like you're on our break, bro. Like that's not really that accurate. It has some sort of 80s tropes in there that are kind of funny, 80s and 90s tropes. And it's good. It's cheesy. It's like a guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
But it's not like surfers don't watch that movie and go, oh, man, that was awesome. The best surf movies, I think, are the documentaries.
Okay. So, well, let me get through my list here.
Okay.
So another movie that comes to mind is Blue Crush. Now, Blue Crush, obviously, it has women surfers, and they're in tight bathing suits, and they're surfing, and it's gorgeous. I mean, not to be sexist in a way, but nevertheless, it is a gorgeous thing to see women on these surfboards in this movie, and it's very well shot, very well produced. And how would you rank that film?
So that movie did some groundbreaking cinematography. It was a movie that started because it came out 20 years ago, I think.
Okay.
So there's great footage of surfing, and they shot it on the North Shore. And they used a lot of local surfers in that movie. That's the thing. So the surf community was got behind it, which was important because in Hawaii, they're very protective of their surf culture because that's theirs, and as well they should, and they've had their culture taken from them. So that movie has a lot of famous North Shore surfers. The North Shore of Oahu, that's where the Bonsai Pipeline is. That is one of the most dangerous waves and most challenging waves in the world. And that's where the Triple Crown of surfing is in the North Shore of Oahu. So that movie really focuses on surfing pipeline and the culture surrounding it and how challenging it is. And yeah, sure, it's just got kind of your standard sort of love story in it, but there's some and the footage, the director did kind of groundbreaking footage with getting cameras inside the wave.
Right.
And that's where you have amazing footage. And that sort of launched now with a GoPro, which is the size of a watch.
Right.
You can get amazing footage. But that movie was one of the first, it really kind of broke the barriers down of how we can shoot surfing and get a camera inside a wave.
Right. I mean, it was gorgeous. The shots are gorgeous.
Amazing.
And of course, you made your bones, and developed your surfing skills in Chicago, a very well-known surfing.
Lake Michigan, they're just gnarly waves of Lake Michigan.
Some of the greatest surfers from that area, of course. Obviously that's not true. And at what point did you discover surfing? Because you grew up in Chicago, I believe.
Yes, I grew up in Chicago. I moved to LA in the 90s. And I just kind of would boogie board. And I had this dumb idea that, you got to grow up surfing. So I didn't grow up, so I can't do it, which was dumb. And two things happened to me. One, I was shooting a commercial for DirecTV, and I had just moved to Santa Monica. I was very close. I was like 4 blocks from the beach.
Yeah.
And one of the camera guys says, you're this close to the beach. You're going to learn how to surf. And I was like, I don't know. I know how to boogie board. And he goes, yeah, nobody ever picked up a chick with a boogie board under their arm. I was like, okay, I'm going to start taking surfing lessons. And then it really hit me in 2006. I went to Afghanistan for the second time to do a comedy tour for the military. This very kind of crazy one. I was on a helicopter that came under fire. We saw wounded people. They took us into a hospital, saw kids and wounded, and it really kind of like rattled me. It's why I'm so vehemently anti-war. And I came back. I mean, I was on a helicopter that came under fire April 27th of 2006.
Yeah.
And we almost got blown out of the sky. So I came back, and a buddy of mine was like, hey, I'm just going to take a surf lesson. Do you want to? And I was like, you got it. And then that whole summer, all I did was surf, because I just had seen like some pretty awful images of war. And that was it. By the end of the summer, we were sitting on the beach, me and my two buddies. One was a comedy writer and one was a guy that like does AV stuff, and he used to play pro hockey. And I went, I get it. And they went, what? I go, why people just check out and become surfers. It's the most beautiful, at one with nature. If you're stressed out or you've got PTSD or whatever, when you're on a wave, there's literally nothing else you're thinking of. You could be sitting on your board and thinking about bills or whatever, but when you catch a wave, you are riding the energy of the earth. And I've done skiing and snowboarding, those are all fun sports, but you know, you have to get a lift ticket and this and that. You buy a surfboard, that's it. That's your purchase. And a wetsuit if you're in an area where you need a wetsuit, but that's it. So you're out, you can, you know, for under $300-400, if you play it cheap, you can surf, and you can just go every day whenever it's doable. And then you're outside. And then I really fell in love with the California surf and beach culture. And
how does El Salvador rate for surfing? And you've been surfing in Hawaii and California, so you've sort of surfed a lot of different places. How does it rate?
It's amazing. The surfing here, first of all, the water is really warm, so you never need a wetsuit, which is great. And there's a really great surf culture that's been here for a long time. And you see that in cities like El Zonte and El Tunco, and even surfing. So there's a good community of surf. You see, and you like in El Tunco where I'm staying, there's a lot of surf schools there. And there's a lot of really young Salvadorian surfers that are really good. And I think now that the surf competitions are coming here, thanks to Bukele, they're seeing, oh, I can become a pro surfer, because there's kids out there ripping, man. I mean, they are like, I'm seeing 10, 12, 13, 14-year-old kids ripping. And so the surfing is great. There's really good surfing. And because, you know, it's mainly a south-facing coastline, but because like any coastline, you have sometimes the breaks face a little east or a little west or whatever. So you can then, what that does is bring in different swell directions, which then gives surfers a consistency of there's always a good wave to ride.
Right.
And that's what makes you a really good surfer. And I mean, I've surfed Costa Rica, I've surfed Brazil, I've surfed 4 different islands in Hawaii. And I mean, Hawaii is like, that's the gold star. I mean, that's like some of the best surfing in the world. This is very close. I mean, this is really, and in the summer when the swells come, that's like, it's really, there's good surfing here and good surfers, and it attracts surf traveling. Like I see surf tourists that are really good surfers because it's a global thing. Like I've been surfing in the wild and I hear, you know, there's Aussies, there's, you know, Argentinians, there's people from all over the world that are really good surfers, and they're coming here because they know it's that good. The waves are that good.
Yeah, you know, Bo, who runs the Garten Hotel, he's a surfer. And one time I saw him looking out into the ocean really intently. I'm like, "Whoa, what's going on up there?" And he said, "They're coming." I'm like, "What's coming?" He said, 6 seconds between waves. Another 3 weeks, it'll be perfect wave season, perfect surfing season. Like he was like, "Okay, Bob, cowabunga or whatever. All right, buddy, surf's up." So I'll give you a movie line. You tell me the movie. Charlie Don't Surf.
Oh, that's Apocalypse Now. Great
surfing scene in that movie, right? And where it's just the character was from California, I guess, and the character of Colonel Kilgore was recognized him as a surfer, and so they kicked up some waves. And Charlie Don't Surf.
That. First of all, you just picked one of my favorite movies of all time that I've seen numerous times. That is so amazing. First, when you go through Martin Sheen's voiceover throughout the movie, and he's describing everybody on the little PT boat.
Yeah.
And he goes, Lance, you know, he said, Lance, was a big time surfer of some of the beaches just south of LA. And, you know, there's all this great surfing stuff in there. And Kilgore's like, you know, I'm a goofy foot myself, but nothing up your caliber. And he's like, and his guys are like, that point's pretty hairy, sir. And he's like, no, Charlie, don't surf. I'll pick your boat up, young captain, and drop it. Like, it's so, and it's Francis Ford Coppola showing the insanity of war. Yeah. And great acting, everyone in that's, I mean, that, and then if you watch part two, the deleted scenes.
Yeah, the director's cut.
Where they steal Kilgore's board.
Really? I haven't seen that scene.
God, it's they steal his board.
Wow.
Oh man, and I mean, Martin Sheen is just that scene where the napalm comes. And ruins the surf. Yeah. And then Kilgore gives that great, you know, that's napalm, that smell. Yeah. Smells like victory. And then he goes, someday this war is going to end. And he's disappointed when he says
the ambiguity in that line. This war is going to end. And you're left there like, well, huh? That's a good thing, right? Yeah. Maybe not.
And you go back and watch the close-up on Martin Sheen is looking at him like, this guy's out of his mind.
Yeah. Oh. So Robert Duvall, of course.
Great actor.
Kilgore. And then, you know, Harvey Keitel was originally to play the Sheen, Martin Sheen role. And there's actually a scene in the final cut of Harvey Keitel getting on the PT boat from the long shot. That they kept in for exposition purposes and a long shot. So you see Harvey Keitel's back. He's getting on the boat. But he got fired because apparently Francis Ford Coppola was saying he's like too self-aware because he had actually been in the military. And whereas Martin Sheen had the very innocent eyes, you know, he's very innocent. He needed someone to convey menace, but also innocence at the same time. And the Harvey Keitel wasn't working with because he was just like actually a military guy who was self-aware in a sense that didn't convey what I think the director wanted, which was the deep pool of innocence, because the whole war is the U.S. stumbling innocently into a situation that they should never have stumbled into and finding the heart of darkness, have you seen the documentary that his wife made?
Oh, Filmmaker's Apocalypse, the Hearts of Darkness filmmaker. That you want to watch a documentary. I tell anyone who's in film wanting to make movies, I go, watch that movie. Yeah. It took him 2.5 years. That scene where he's on the phone, where he's like, if Brando doesn't do it, get De Niro. If Darren, you know, he's dealing with everything. I mean, Hopper forgetting his lines because he's high.
Right. Or Martin Sheen had a heart attack. Yeah. And then there said the doctor was like, you know, if you keep this up, he's going to die. And he's like, he's not going to die on my movie. Unless I direct him to die, essentially. Yeah. Right. Unless it's in the script, he's not going to die. So he's totally possessed for 2.5 years. And of course, it was the first film about Vietnam that came out because it was a taboo subject for a long time. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, a lot of other Vietnam movies came on afterward. But it's still, it's a masterful achievement in film without a doubt. Now, Francis Ford Coppola is supposed to be coming out with a new film. Like Metropolis or Megalopolis or something like that.
Oh, wow.
Which it's a huge project, big project. He's been working on it for a while. And we'll see what happens there. Talking about filmmakers, which is always a fun conversation. Martin Scorsese. I thought The Irishman was a fucking disaster. It was the most boring, stupidest film ever made. Apparently this latest one with De Niro and they're on an Indian reservation during the turn of the century, exploiting the oil business. Oh yeah, that one's supposed to be good. I haven't seen it, but it sounds, I don't know. Killers of the Flower Moon.
Yeah, it sounds a bit indulgent and long-winded, maybe. But The Irishman was legitimately a disaster film. That was the script was terrible. But you know what the worst script of a film I've seen in a long time? I don't know why we're on this massive film tangent, but nevertheless. You're from Hollywood, so I feel compelled to speak on this topic.
I could talk movies all day, man. Okay. I did a movie podcast for 10 years, so I could talk about this.
Well, then explain to me how anyone could consider in any conceivable way the script for the film Oppenheimer to be anything but a complete disaster.
So what happens in Hollywood at that point? You already have all these A-listers that have proven they're going to make money. So if I'm an unknown director, they're going to say, I don't know, this is maybe, man, you know, but you're, so in the case of Oppenheimer, you had Christopher Nolan, done deal. Christopher Nolan says, I have a script about, you know, puppies eating snail food. They're going to go, done. Here's $100 million. Go make it. So the challenge, and I think this is what happens to, like with The Irishman, like you assemble that cast. You tell me, I'm a studio head or any studio. You tell me, Graham Elwood, I've got Martin Scorsese, you know, De Niro. I've got all these guys, Joe Pesci. I'm like, done. This is going to be awesome. So, you know, I didn't see, I saw The Irishman and I was like, man, this is a disappointment. So I didn't see Oppenheimer. I don't know. Some people say it's good, some don't. I don't know. But when you attach those big names to it,
yeah,
and the studio puts in whatever, 100 and $150 million, they're going to push out through their marketing machine, this movie's great. And they have a whole system in place of you know, they used to call them junketeers. Now they just get sent links and stuff, but these certain amount of critics who just go out and they get free movies and free stuff and they're paid well. And they're basically, it's sort of like, give us a good quote. You know what I mean? Like they're just out there pushing it, saying this is amazing. And everyone will kind of buy it.
Yeah, it was marketed well and it won Academy Awards and a lot of Academy Awards. And Cillian Murphy is an incredible actor. Yeah. And but the script was really terrible. They managed to make this story, which should be an interesting story, they managed to make it very melodramatic and, you know, soap opera like, and really stripped it of any dramatic tension, actually. So there's a few different ways you could have done the script that I thought would have made it much more compelling film watching. But, you know, this was not in any way, I mean, in 5 or 10 years time, I think people will look back and say, you know, that the script is horrible and overhyped.
Another reason why scripts, again, I haven't seen Oppenheimer, so I can't speak specifically to Oppenheimer, but another reason is why this can happen in the big studio system. They buy a script and then they bring in punch-up writers to add to it. And I don't know if this is what happened with Oppenheimer, but I've seen this with like the adaptation of like a really good book or something, or the studio, somebody writes a great story and then you find out it had 5 different, and they're not listed in the credits.
Right.
So now we've got too many cooks in the kitchen.
Right.
The writer's vision got diluted and watered down. And so that happens a lot.
Well, 2 points. Number one, I heard that Shawshank Redemption was shot word for word exactly as the original script was delivered.
Which is why it's great.
Which is could be why it's great. And Christopher Nolan, of course, he also directed Dunkirk, I believe. Right?
Was that Dunkirk?
I think.
Let me look that up.
I think he did Dunkirk. And Dunkirk, I think, was masterful movie making and one of the best movies I've ever seen. And principally because of the direction of the film and the cinematography of the film. The performances are great and the script is great, but the vision of that film.
Yeah, Christopher Nolan did direct
of the director's vision of that film was realized on an epic scale, truly an epic scale that was nuanced and powerful, and a great film. So I mean, I'll say that about Christopher Nolan.
I think he's a great filmmaker, and he has a very singular vision. But it's also like in the totality of somebody's career, 20, 30, he'll have a 40-year career.
Yeah.
Everything's not going to be a home run. That's just the way, you know what I mean? That's, you know, Michael Jordan missed a lot of game-winning shots.
3,000. Yeah, he missed 300 or something.
Something like,
I read that quote all the time. I'm the greatest because I missed 3,000 shots. I missed 300 game-winning shots, you know, and I'm still the greatest.
Yeah.
Well, who's the strikeout king of all time in baseball?
Babe Ruth. Yeah.
This is what guys think about when we fuck up. It's like, you know what? I fucked up, but Michael Jordan fucked up too. So did Babe Ruth. So it's okay. But also, it's also an American thing because in America, it's not how many times you fall down, it's how many times you get up. Whereas in Europe, it's you get stigmatized if you have any failures at all in your resume. So people are fairly afraid to take risks. So it's not a risk-taking entrepreneurial environment in Europe. In the UK, it's not entrepreneurial, it's not risk-taking. It's people grow up to want to be civil servants. Like I remember when I met somebody in France once and I'm saying like, what, when you get out of college, what do you want to be? What's your career? And they're like, I want to be a civil servant. That was their goal in life. And I'm like, what? That's what you're aiming for? And I'm like, you would never, ever hear anyone in the United States. I think when I was growing up, no one would say, I want to be a bureaucrat. I want to be a paper pusher. I want to be a rubber stamper. I want to be a nobody in Nowhereville. But in Europe, it's like, you've made it. You've made it.
Well, to your point, since we're talking about movies, I mean, that is a common theme in a lot of Hollywood movies is the guy got his ass kicked and get back up. What's the theme of Rocky? The first Rocky, he loses. In Rocky 1, he loses.
Right.
But the scene in Rocky that's the most significant is that they're in round 14 or 15.
Yeah.
And they're just sitting there. And Rocky comes back out. And Apollo Creed goes, the look on his face, this is where Rocky actually won the fight. He didn't, the judges didn't give it to him. Right. Apollo Creed, Carl Weathers had just passed away, RIP, great actor, goes, this guy keeps coming at me.
Yeah.
That is the goal. And if you watch, I watched Rocky again a year and a half ago, right before I taped my comedy special.
Yeah.
Manifested at grahamella.com.
Oh yeah. It's great special, by the way. I have it on DVD.
Doesn't exist on DVD, but I really appreciate you saying that. I have it on Laserdisc.
I have it on a VHS tape. I play it religiously every Easter Sunday.
We all watched it while we were doing peyote with this doctor last weekend. And this
during the peyote dropping session, we watched Graham Elwood's Biodome Part 7 with Stephen Baldwin's child, and it was comedy genius from opening credit, title card, end credit, nonstop hilarity. You never stop laughing at this film. Biodome 7.
Biodome 7.
And Stephen Baldwin's illegitimate step cousin. It's a classic. If you like Caddyshack.
It's the Caddyshack 2.
It's the Caddyshack 2 of sleepover movies in the desert with giant worms. It's called Biodome 7. It's a great film on VHS only. It's a collector's item.
This is our most informative episode about Bitcoin ever that we've ever done.
Totally, totally, man.
Here's what I was going to say about Rocky.
Louis B. Mayer, look, the Hollywood story, the Rocky story. I mean, the people who created the Hollywood industry, Louis B. Mayer and these others, right? They're European immigrants, right? They're coming over from war-torn Europe, where they escaped the bad man of World War II, and they created the Superman, right? The Superman is an American creation of the 1930s during the Depression.
Right.
And Superman became an American archetype, the superhero. And the Hollywood story of, coming back from adversity and triumphing over adversity, it comes from in a lot of ways from the experiences of immigrants coming from Europe who are escaping the psychotic madman of World War II. And so that is carried through as the story, the Hollywood kind of story. Whereas in Europe, I lived in France for 14 years. And, it's funny because in the United States, every single one sheet that you see for a film, the poster, 99 out of 100 times, it'll be a man holding a gun.
Right.
Without a doubt. Right. Look at those posters. It's going to be a male figure, whether it's a superhero or a cop or a vigilante. They're
gangster,
there.
Whatever.
They've got a gun. Yeah. Essentially, and then European movies, you'll never see a poster of somebody holding a gun or a weapon of any type. It's always the storyline, just like in the U.S., the storyline is always like coming back from adversity. All these stories with Liam Neeson, it's the latest incarnation of the guy who's been wronged, who goes out and kills everybody.
Yeah.
And the guy from Breaking Bad,
Better Call Saul,
Yeah.
the star, he just starred in a film similarly where he's an ordinary guy who got wronged, who went out and killed everybody.
Right.
And so in Europe, in France in particular, the storyline is always the same. A cuckold male guy in his 50s and 60s whose wife is strayed. And that's the storyline of almost every French movie of the past 30 years. And it's usually the same actors because they don't have a very robust film industry. So they have like 20 male actors. And they play this role over and over and over again for 20 years. That's the only storyline that you see in Europe. I mean, I just saw an ad for a trailer for this. There's the song, that goes, yes, I can boogie, boogie, boogie. This like song, this disco-y song. So I'm like, where did this song come from? It's kind of catchy. It's like, oh, it's featured in a French film about a 65-year-old guy who's been cuckolded by his wife and he's having a midlife crisis. It's like, oh, okay. You mean that film? They've made 50 times in the last 3 years. That exact same movie. That's the same movie they make. That's their story. That's their heroic story. Is the cuckold male is the Rocky of France. With a pastis and a camembert. Instead of a machete and a Glock. He's got his camembert in one hand, his pastis in the other, and he's crying to his best friend, about this. And this is the European film story. So anyway, that's the story about European film. Now, this went on for a while, didn't it? Was there some news on something
We're
around
going
there?
to do some news. I have since we were at the top of this,
Yeah.
actually, we were talking about is it this? Yes. You tweeted this out.
Yeah.
Bitcoin news, IMF demands Pakistan to impose capital gains tax on Bitcoin and crypto investment to receive a $3 billion aid package. The IMF, the strong arm, the banking wing of the American mafia. And then you wrote, the IMF is scared shitless of Bitcoin.
But I used a poop emoji, though.
You did. Scared.
I thought that was very restrained of me.
It was.
Not to use a curse word. I used poop emoji dash less.
Nice work.
Thank you. I mean, I'm sensitive to people out there that might be offended by all these expletives that are not deleted. Everyone. Anyway, the IMF, is a central bank, right? The International Monetary Fund. It's like a central bank. It's like the World Bank. It's like other central banks, like the Federal Reserve Bank, ECB, Bank of Bank of Japan, right? It's a central bank. It's a large centralized bank. Right? And they print fiat money, right? In the IMF, they create something called the STD, which is not a sexually transmitted disease. Wait a minute, I got this mixed up. What do they print? They don't print STDs.
SDT?
What is the IMF's fiat money? It's I forget what it is. Look it up.
Something bomb.
IMF fiat money. And so they have their own fake money, fiat money. And so they like to print it up and dictate to folks what they should be doing. And they'll give them lots of this fake money that they keep printing. And of course, purchasing power of that fake money continues to go down. But people are stupid enough to take that stupid money because they think only in terms of the next 5. SDR. Special drawing rights.
Yes.
Special drawing rights, SDR. I said STD, which is kind of funny. Sexually transmitted
They both
disease.
act the same. They both have the same effect.
They both give you herpes. It's the SDR is the herpes of fiat money. And STD is the gold standard of sexual diseases. It's like one big cluster fuck. And so the SDR, special drawing rights, this is what the IMF uses for influence peddling. And so, Bitcoin obviously is superior to any fiat money. It's superior to gold. It's going to demonetize everything. Everything goes to zero against Bitcoin, including the SDR. And so if you're the printing of the SDR, you're going to be like, fuck you. So they say to Pakistan, look, man, we put you in debt and you owe us interest on that debt.
and we're going to cut you off, and we're going to force, we're going to cause you misery unless you tell us you're not going to accept Bitcoin, or you're going to tax Bitcoin, or you're going to cut yourself off for Bitcoin. Because if you don't do that, we're going to cut you off from all of our fake money printing, and you won't be able to buy that shawarma or whatever it is in Pakistan that they. What do they eat in Pakistan? What's the dish? It's is it a shawarma
or some of that? I think it's sort of similar to Indian food. You know what I mean?
It's Indian food, similar to Indian food.
Yeah,
yeah. It's
dal and curry,
a lot of curry.
Yeah.
So we're gonna, you're thinking about that dal you're gonna have, but now we're telling you you won't be having it unless you cut off from this Bitcoin, and they're like, well, whatever. So it's an extortion racket. It's a racket. They're racketeering. It's a protection racket that they are protecting their money printing oligopoly racket. And of course, they're going to be going down this path. They did this to Argentina. Before Milei took office, the IMF got Argentina to agree not to put Bitcoin as legal tender, or they wouldn't renew an IMF loan, right? They were successful in their extortion racket in Argentina. What's going on in El Salvador? Well, we haven't heard from the IMF recently. We're not sure what's cooking up. They're cooking up, what their thoughts are. I know that the country has some IMF debt on the books. It's not that onerous. It's not that big.
Because they paid a bunch off.
They paid a bunch off. Yeah, right. The country is paying down debt. Right, so the debt to equity ratio is actually improving quite substantially because the growth, the debt to GDP is improving because GDP has gone from 28 to 35 billion just in the last few years, and the debt is being paid down. So that debt to GDP ratio is improving. So and that's without the IMF. So the IMF, I don't think at this point in El Salvador, and I would have no specialized knowledge about this. I have no insight into this other than my opinion as an outsider. And my outside opinion is that the IMF does not have the ability to impose their will onto El Salvador when it comes to Bitcoin. That is my opinion on this. And based on the 450 million that was just put into the country's Bitcoin wallet and cold storage, clearly the country is doing well and growing. And this is without IMF interference. And the IMF is a country, is an institution that without, for example, the 2008 financial crisis that they helped engineer, they would have gone out of business. But, IMF, Goldman Sachs, ECB, the European Central Bank, engineered Greece and Ireland collapse in 2008. And that's been documented, and that's easy to document. That's easy to prove. For example, Goldman Sachs did the following, Greece, to be included in the euro, which they were launching approximately in that era, had to have a certain debt to GDP ratio, let's call it. And they were not qualified to be part of the euro because they had too much debt. Goldman Sachs simply came in and cooked the books for Greece, the sovereign state of Greece, to make it appear as though they had more equity and less debt than they actually have. And they did this on two separate occasions. It's been well documented. No one disputes this. And to allow Greece to enter the euro, wherein once inside, they quickly collapsed because they were not financially really in a position to take on the responsibility of the euro. And guess who was making a massive bet against Greece, who profited from the credit default swaps betting against Greece? Oh, it was Goldman Sachs. So Goldman Sachs gets a fee to cook the books to get them in. Then Goldman Sachs makes these massive bets against them that they'll fail once they're in. And the former president or premier or whatever they have there was also implicated in this racketeering that went on. I'm not sure what the status is at this time, whether that was ever resolved, but it didn't look good at the time. And so this is also in Ireland. They also went through a similar situation where the leadership in Ireland, surprisingly, it might be the most corrupt country in the EU. A lot of people don't associate
I didn't know
Ireland
that.
with political corruption on that scale. But it is incredibly corrupt. And in 2008, the curtain was pulled back, and we saw really the players in Ireland. And I made a comment at the time that RTE, which is the state broadcaster, which is similar to the BBC, but in Ireland, I said the biggest threat for Ireland is the RTE, because they are clearly propagandists for the worst charlatans in the banking sector and political corruption in Europe. And a lot of people quoted me on that, and they're like, this Max is actually right. The RTE is hellacious. But of course, there's a huge portion of the population that benefits from the corruption, and they would in the media in particular, it has the worst media in the world is in Ireland. It's horrible. Concentrated toward centralization of certain folks that are the ruling folks in the country. But across the board, though, in Europe, it's kind of a mess. I could do a whole different show on that. But the point being that the IMF is in the business of creating problems that they solve by printing more money. It's similar to the pharmaceutical industry that will create diseases,
right,
to that sell you the drugs to cure the diseases that they create, or the banking industry will create financial problems, and that, we have a solution here with our derivative product. This pension account in Alabama, you're out of money thanks to the fact that we sold you a lot of garbage. Well, we have a derivative product to help you solve the garbage of your pension account. By the way, we just lost half your pension money again. Like Matt Taibbi has written extensively about this, right? So it's just the same mentality. It's just pernicious, cancerous, institutionalized fraud in every sector of the economy, every class of professional.
I mean, speaking of movies, it's like that in the Goodfellas, where they take over the restaurant. The whole goal of it is to firebomb it and collect the insurance money. They we run the products in the front door, steal them out the back. Then the guy's bankrupt, and then we set it on fire and make money. That's how the mob works.
100%.
Only these guys wear three-piece suits, and they're considered upstanding citizens, and the mob is considered criminals.
Right. In this case, the insurance money is in the form of a CDS, or credit default swap, which allows you to make a bet against on something collapsing. So that's Greece. What the CDS bets against Greece were extraordinarily high because the people making those bets were the ones who were the arsonists who are creating the collapse. And we see this over and over again. That people say, well, the financial crimes are victimless crimes.
Oh God, no.
But that's completely false, of course, because when you bankrupt a country, it causes a lot of hardship and a lot of agony. It's slow moving. The deaths of despair, and these things could take years to develop.
Yeah, but you're right. There is. I mean, look at America. I mean, the suicide rate, the opioid epidemic. All of these, addictions and isms you can tie a lot of them. There's a lot of contributing factors to these things,
Yep.
but every time there's a big financial crisis, the death rate goes up because people are stressed out. They check out, they do drugs, they commit suicide. You could draw a direct line to these financial crimes to the deaths of people. There's no two ways about it. I mean, 6 million foreclosures happened in America as a result of the 2008 crisis. That's not 6 million people. That's 6 million families.
Right.
So you're probably talking somewhere in the neighborhood of 20-some million people were affected.
At this event, or any event that I go to, that we go, Max and Stacy go to, the preponderance of people who know our work know us from 2008. When that hit, and they were looking for answers.
That's how I know you.
They found us, yeah.
I don't know you because of watching you because of Bitcoin. I know you because I was one of the people who lost my home.
Right.
In 2000, I lost it in 2010, but it was a part of the 2008 crash. And I was in a 16-month battle with the banks. They lied to me and said, well, we're going to cut your mortgage payment in half. Here's a forbearance. It's a 3-month. After the end of the 3 months, we'll restructure your loan. At the end of the 3 months, they went, you don't qualify for the restructure. Oh, and now you're 3 months behind because you've only been making half payments. They did that to me and millions of other people. So I was furious. And when I heard you speak about the financial crisis, I was like, this guy knows it. You were in it. You know how these corrupt assholes work. And that's that was the door opening. I didn't even know what Bitcoin was at that point. But when I started to realize Bitcoin, I connected the two and went, this is a solution to this systemic, institutionalized corruption that screws over average people.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was like a lot of people know me or would say that I scream a lot or I'm very animated. And this is because in that 2008 period, what I felt like I could do was to channel the anger of the people who were being victimized and to let them know that their anger was justified and that the anger was justified and they should not in any way feel like they had done something wrong. I mean, they were the victim of a massive crime by institutional crime by these banks, and then to kind of explain what happened in those terms, right? And so, I mean, I became especially in like Greek television or Irish television, like became kind of famous in Greece and Ireland because when I was interviewed on Al Jazeera English or the BBC or these other international broadcasters and they had me on against somebody else, I would start yelling at them like they're terrorists, they're financial terrorists, because there's some Greek academics saying that, well, the banks were over leveraged and they needed to restructure. And just going down to the laundry list of gobbledygook you might read in the Financial Times, which is all just obfuscating to words to hide criminal activity. And I would simply deconstruct it live on the air and say, and you just said this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. It's because you're a terrorist. You're a terrorist. You're no different than Osama bin Laden. You just killed those people, right? And they're like, what the hell are you talking about? And the host is like, wow, this is interesting. We'll have this guy back on. So this is how I became kind of the screaming crazy man on TV, because in the financial news, everyone hides behind the obfuscation of jargon that nobody questions. Nobody who interviews a financial professional on TV knows how to ask them a question. Right. They simply nod their head and they'll say, oh, well, that makes sense. But they really don't know what they're saying. And it's very easy to be completely cryptic when speaking about finance on TV, because there's like 5 layers deep before you actually get to what you're actually trying to talk about. It's always...
And they exploit the fact that most average people don't understand this stuff. And then somebody says, I have a degree from fill in the blank financial, and you go, oh, well, that's a prestigious school. Yeah. And then they just regurgitate this crap. And it's like, I'm sitting there going, comedian, game show host who lost his home. I know you're full of shit, but I don't have the knowledge. You throw a bunch of $10 words at me, Bloomberg guy, and I can't argue with you. And it's like, and then I get patted on the head. Well, I have this degree from this fancy school. So, and it's like, you did do that. And I want people to understand when you talk about how many people were affected. I'll just give you I was married. I had no kids. I have no kids. So it negatively impacted we ended up getting divorced. It's not all on the financial stuff, but there's no fucking way on earth that helped.
Right.
That was going to be my retirement, gone.
Right.
So again, I don't have any kids of my own, but I would probably leave that to my 6 nieces and nephews.
Right.
So that intergenerational wealth is gone.
Right.
So now add in the people who did have kids.
Right.
And hey, kids, there's no inheritance for you when mommy and dad go. So there's that.
Right.
Thankfully I was already sober, so I didn't go down that road.
Right.
But I could have. I thought about it. I mean, I almost, I had numerous times of like, do I kill myself? Do I just go fucking beat the shit out of? Do I just unleash my rage?
Yeah.
Suicide by cop, whatever. I had those moments, and it was really hard.
This is a really funny comedy show. I gotta tell you.
This is great. This is hilarious.
I was like, if you weren't having a good time 5 minutes ago, let me tell you, friends, Biodome 7 is a movie. It's underrated. It's funny. It's poignant. It's Graham Elwood struggling to get his house back with Stephen Baldwin.
Which is
I hear you. I give you a good example. It's like if the term debt monetization.
Let me just interrupt real quick.
No.
damn it, I'm sick of this line because you're bringing me down, man.
No.
You think I come on this show?
Comedy helped me.
About how fucking hellacious the 2008 financial crisis was? I lived it. I help people get through it. I know all about it. I don't need to relive it.
I'm not reliving it. I'll just say this real quick. Going on the road and telling jokes during that time was what kept me sane. Yeah. I'd make a room full of strangers laugh and I go, it's going to be okay. So anyway, your point. That's what I just want to say.
I'm just being a dick, obviously.
It's all right.
Obviously, I'm being an insensitive, moron. But it's fine. That's what I excel at.
Someday this war is going to end. Bummer.
I mean, here's a good example. If I said debt monetization, you would think, wow, that sounds
fancy.
Well, it also sounds kind of dubious, right?
Yeah.
It's what quote unquote banana republics do, right? They print money to buy their own debt, right? Does that sound sustainable?
No.
Okay. So does America do that?
Gee, I think so.
But they don't call it that, do they?
No.
What do they call it?
What do they call it? Quantitative easing.
Quantitative easing. So again, that's just. And they say, well, it's the same as debt monetization. They're like, no, because in debt monetization, you never stop. But in quantitative easing, we will stop.
Just not now.
Not now. Someday we might.
I'm not an alcoholic. I just drink every day.
Right.
And if it gets out of control, I'll stop.
I'll just stop.
Yeah.
And they'll say like, oh, we're doing quantitative tightening now, right? And that was like a few months ago, like the Fed is, easing up and there's going to be a soft landing. And of course, now Yellen has said that she misstated when she said that inflation was transitory. No, inflation is not transitory. And guess what? Interest rates bottomed out at 3.8% on the 10-year. It's back to 4.3, heading over 5%, where it was just a few months ago. And that was considered very high for interest rates. That means mortgage rates are going to go higher. And cocoa prices is just as it's a commodity, one of many commodities. Have you seen the chart of cocoa? Pull up chart of cocoa.
Chart of cocoa. While I'm pulling this up, I'll just say this.
Cocoa futures prices chart. And put it up on the screen. I don't know if we can do it.
Futures.
Cocoa futures. COCOA. Cocoa futures. Cocoa prices.
U.S. cocoa futures price today.
They have a chart. They have like a 5-year chart, 2-year chart, 1-year chart.
They have
chart of a cocoa price.
1 month. Let's see.
Yeah. Anyway, if you find cocoa prices,
5 years. I'll do a 5-year chart.
Yeah.
Oh wow, they're going through the roof.
Yeah, there's a parabolic, straight up move, right?
Yeah.
Like that.
It's been a flat line for 5 years, and then in the last 9 months, it's gone, or 2 years maybe.
Right, it's like quadrupled or up 500%.
Yeah.
So there's a few reasons.
Actually, I will show
cocoa production is concentrated in a couple of countries that are politically unstable, et cetera. But I think that it's a harbinger of greater commodity inflation across the board. So inflation and of course the purchasing power, the dollar and fiat money is withering away. It's collapsing. So I think cocoa prices are kind of a view of what's to come. Oil is the most traded commodity in the world. Second is gold, or vice versa. But I think it's oil and then gold. So oil is highly politicized, and the price discovery in oil is not great. Doesn't really give great signals. But I think that you're going to start seeing oil start to make a move to like $100 to $200 a barrel again. And I think gold is kind of broken out of its slumber. Gold, bad price discovery for years now. It hasn't reflected the relationship it's had to debt now for 20 years. But I think once it catches up, you're talking $3,000 an ounce for gold, right? Silver can easily get to close to $100 an ounce. Bitcoin, obviously, it's a commodity. It's a synthetic, absolutely scarce digital commodity is what Bitcoin is. It's at 70,000 or 68,000, up from $1 back in 2011, and could easily get to $300,000-$400,000. So that's a commodity. And so everybody who's struggling right now with inflation, it's going to get a lot worse. And so people who put out those TikTok videos about, wow, here's 7 French fries at the ball game, cost me $12.
Okay, it's going to be $24 next time you go to the ball game. You, single mom, driving around complaining about you can't afford rent anymore. Well, guess what? That's not going to get any better anytime soon. Prices are only going to go up. Food prices are only going to go up. Commodity prices are only going to go up, especially if there's a war, if the escalation with Russia is really fucking stupid.
I know.
Because Russia is the #1 commodity producer in the world. Nobody comes close. So, and they are like 60% of natural gas into Europe comes from Russia. So they cut off, they blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. That just all it did was jack up the price of gas, which actually benefited Russia.
All that did was
more.
It benefited Russia and hurt Western Europe
Completely.
And it was very obviously America did it.
Obviously. So, I mean, this is all comes out in the wash. It comes out in higher prices, and those higher prices are hurting middle-class Americans extraordinarily, and they are all falling out of the middle class. What's called the lower middle class, where it's like 1 foot on the poverty line. Those people are dropping under the poverty line, and of course, that's going to require a huge money printing effort for Medicaid and emergency housing, and build more prisons, and let's print more money, which of course is going to cause more inflation. And that's going to just make the situation much, much worse. So we're actually entering into the potential of hyperinflation in the United States with the US dollar. Now, Jack Dorsey tweeted this last year, something like hyperinflation. And every economist in the world, including Paul Krugman at the New York Times, was like, what does this guy know about economics? He's a guy who makes funny little websites. He doesn't know anything, right? And, it looks like he's right. And the price of stuff that people actually buy, like healthcare, is compounding at already like 20% or more, right? I mean, it's the stuff that's getting cheaper, like flat screen TVs, it's not essential.
No.
You can do without a flat screen TV, but you can do without buying Vietnamese-made jumpers or sweaters or whatever. But healthcare is non-negotiable. Like if you have to go to the hospital, you're going to pay what they charge.
Milk, eggs, gas,
right, basic food, commodities, farming, all this stuff. So all this stuff is going to go. And the conflict with Russia is a completely goal. It's a goal against oneself. There's no point in it whatsoever other than to feed the defense contractors and the money laundering racket that is Ukraine. Let's be honest, folks. Ukraine is a money laundering shithole. That's all it's good for. That's all it's been now for years. Victoria Nuland, if you notice, who orchestrated the coup in 2014 in the Maidan, she's now exited stage left because she knows the whole thing's about to go to sideways. She doesn't want it. She's the what do you call when the writer puts the fake name on the script?
Pseudonym.
There's a famous pseudonym.
Oh yeah, Bob.
The script by
yeah.
You used to be more prevalent, but it's like it's you don't want your name on this garbage. Yeah. So she's like removing herself at the last second because she knows it's about to go tits up, and so the prices, and then what's the point? What is the point of all this other than it's just feeding the worst kleptocrats in society are just feeding at the buffet of corruption, right? There is no representational government whatsoever anymore in the United States. You don't find it in any strata from the federal level to the regional level to the local level. It's fucking shithole all the way down. There's nothing.
Yeah. There might be like one city council member here or there that's fighting, but they have no real power. They're alone. They're standing alone amongst all this corruption. At best, that's the best you're going to find. It's a completely corrupt system. No, America is not a representative democracy. It's a kleptocracy run by oligarchs. It's completely corrupt, and it's only getting worse. And like you say, when gas is $7, $8, $10 a gallon, and milk is $7 a gallon, what you know,
What the hell are you going to do?
What are you going to do?
So, Bitcoin, to end it on a positive note, Bitcoin is the fastest horse in the race, as Paul Tudor Jones calls it. So it will not only keep up with inflation, but it'll beat inflation, because the flow of capital around the world sees Bitcoin at, let's call it a $2 trillion asset. And if gold is 14 trillion, then Bitcoin should be at least 14 trillion. So that's a 7x from there. So you're making 7x on your money in the next, let's say, 2 years. And so you're outperforming inflation on that basis. Now, you can do something with that information to protect yourself going forward. Obviously, it's tricky because you have to also live. So it's hard to put money into Bitcoin and also buy food and stuff like that. So, but nevertheless, and I saw somebody else make a comment on Twitter like, well, that's true with any asset is going to do well in an inflationary environment. That's true, but not as well as Bitcoin. So every single asset will go effectively to zero against Bitcoin. Houses, fine art, jewels, all the assets that will do well in inflation are going to go effectively to zero against Bitcoin. And of course, fiat money, and of course, gold. So it's true that those assets will do well in an inflationary environment. However, they will not do as well as Bitcoin by any stretch of the imagination. So don't think that because you have a few houses and a Modigliani in your basement that you're going to be doing as well as if you had Bitcoin, because you're not. You're going to be crushed by the purchasing power increase in Bitcoin. And that's true. And a lot of people understand this now. And we are just waiting for another major player, like another Michael Saylor or another El Salvador, to enter into the arena.
And they will.
And then we'll see a big significant jump as it becomes an avalanche, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're standing in front of an avalanche, you can either be crushed by it or you can, surf it.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's our show, ladies and gentlemen. We've covered everything.
Right. And I think importantly, right now we're having a sale on Biodome 7, which if you call, operators are standing by, and we'll send you an autographed VHS tape, Biodome 7, starring Graham Elwood.
Call 1-800 Stephen Baldwin.
Stephen Baldwin. Max Kaiser in an uncredited role as dead person number 4. I appear in the last reel of the picture, and it's a tear-jerking story of a nurse who raises 5 orphan boys who all grow up to become nuclear physicists during the 12th century.
Oh wow, this sounds fascinating.
It is. So it's a sci-fi period piece in the style of Barry Lyndon. If you know that Stanley Kubrick film, which was shot entirely with natural lighting. And we do that simply because we couldn't afford lighting.
Right.
So it's all natural lighting. And we use, the equipment from the 70s to film this, to tape this on videotape, because that's, again, the only thing we could afford was a VHS equipment that we got on eBay for $47. But the acting is, as Rex Reed said at the New York Post, that one air sickness bag wasn't enough. He needed 5. He gave it 5 vomit bags, which is, for Rex Reed, he's never gone 5. He's never gone 5.
So operators are standing by, folks. Thank you for watching the Orange Pill podcast. And don't remember, when somebody like Janet Yellen says that we're going to have a soft landing for inflation, that's like hearing just the tip. That's what that means. It's just the tip. And so,
that's so vulgar.
Or if they say, oh, your money's safe. When I hear that one, get your money out of a bank immediately, because they're going to shut it down when you hear that one. So thanks for watching. Follow us, like us, all the places to follow us below. And again, 1-800 Stephen Baldwin. Call that number immediately.
Next time, I'll tell funny Stephen Baldwin jokes. We made a series together called The Great American Pilgrimage for our team. It was I think it was like a 17-part, half-hour TV show. Stephen Baldwin and Max Kaiser traveling in an RV across America.
Ooh.
Okay, it's still on, I think you can find it on YouTube. And we shot this thing maybe 5 years ago. And so let me tell you something. just to give you one side story about this. We pull into the Standing Rock Reservation, Indian Reservation, and Max and Stacy are in our hotel room, and Stephen comes bursting into the room and says the producer and the director are in jail. And they had been stopped on the road to the Indian Rock Reservation by the cops, who went through their RV and found CBD oil from Colorado. But of course, in the state we were in, Montana, I think it was, it's illegal. And so they were in jail. And then Stephen reached under his bed, pulled out a suitcase, it was filled with guns, and said, let's go save them. And so he strapped on these fucking guns and went tearing off to go save his friends and bust them out of jail. The next thing we know, he's sending us video on his phone of the producer and the director in jail through jail bars wearing those black and white striped jail uniforms like you'd see in a silent movie or something. And they're in jail. And he's plotting to bust them out, right? So then I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, this show was boring as fuck, but now we've got a winner.
This is a home run.
We got a winner, right? And I'm thinking, this is great, because I'm one of the producers. I'm like, this is manna from heaven. I can just see the advertisement now. Stephen Baldwin with a bunch of guns trying to bust his friends out of jail. And so I'm like, Stephen, this is the greatest thing that could have ever happened to us. He's like, no, because the purpose of this was to be spiritual and to help people find God and Jesus. And this would alienate my audience. I'm like, what? It's like, I'm the producer of this picture, and we're going with jailbirds. Not going to go with no Bible thumping on this project. But that footage never saw this.
Oh,
it was never seen. And it's hidden and that was just one episode of this epically disastrous shoot. That would have been one of the funniest things. I mean, Biodome, at the end of the day, was kind of funny, but this is epically humorous. The Great American Pilgrimage, it was into the bowels of American depravity by evangelical nutbags, on RT. And the whole thing was produced to piss off his brother Alec, because Alec when Trump got elected, Alec disowned his friends who didn't take a pledge of allegiance to Hillary. If you were not a Hillary supporter, he cut you off, including his own family, including Stephen.
wow.
So I'd known him for 30 years. And because I did not swear in blood that I hated Trump and loved Hillary, he started to publicly just insult me on Twitter for no reason. I'd known the guy for 30 years. So Stephen and I said, let's make him do a show on RT, which of course Alec would hate. And we're going to make jokes about Alec the whole time,
Right.
It would just make, fun of him. And then so when we arrive on day one of this shoot, it's the whole character changed to being an evangelical Bible story that I was now starring in. Did you ever see that show on TV, Davy and Goliath, about those animatronic puppets?
I think
there's a kid and his dog, and there's oh, hi, Goliath. This day, you just watch a Sunday morning, it's Bible stories for kids who can't sleep. It's 5 a.m. or something right after Modern Farmer. It's Davy and Goliath, right? It's evangelical stories for 9-year-olds. So it's that's what this is going to be all about. Pilgrim, Pilgrim of God. I'm like, oh man, I could hear the money being flushed down the toilet. I'm thinking, the budget on this fucking thing, it's the same budget that was made to use the French Connection. The French Connection, guess what the budget was on the French Connection?
probably
right?
something like $2 million.
$1.3 million.
Yeah.
Right? To make the French Connection, okay? That was the budget on this thing. And what did we do with it? It's man, that was just one of the many, many, many stories.
Well, we'll be back next week with more Stephen Baldwin Goes Shit Nuts in Montana. We'll be back with that more next week. So Like, share, subscribe. Go to GrahamElwood.com. We're going to have autographed Stephen Baldwin guns for sale. Stephen Baldwin goes shit nuts in Montana. That's the series.
Yeah.
So thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you soon.